figured if everybody else could be late, I could be late once. But appreciate it. Appreciate everybody coming, and committee members and the people in the audience. Today, we had several discussions, a couple of discussions on the bill, SB 431. Had about an hour and 7-minute subcommittee yesterday, and then full committee we had a couple other bills, so we decided today we'd come back to SB 431 and have a little discussion on it. I have somebody from the committee that wants to say something. Mr. Rogers.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of committees, I would like to withdraw the substitute Senate Bill 431 and go back to the Senate Bill 431 in its original state, LC 34074 8S SCS, if the committee so desires.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Representative Wicks on mic 1. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's the bill we have here. I was looking at it, but I had a person from my Cobb Marietta Water Authority, and I think they've even worked on some amendment language, and I wanted to make a motion to amend this bill if I could.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Weeks. Have you got any copies or a few copies?
I have 3, 4. It's really, I think I can explain it pretty well.
Okay. Well, while you're explaining it, we'll have a few copies run off, and it'll work out fine. Go ahead.
If you turn to page 3, right after, that's section, the end of section C that we're looking, let's see. Chart, yes. So top of page 3, it would be add a new subsection D to section 1.
Are you on the substitute?
I probably am. So we need to change. Okay, well, I would like to add a new subsection, whatever it would be, D or what, right before where it says this act shall become effective July 1 at the end.
Right.
It'd be right before that section. And whatever the number or D, C, whatever, it would simply say this code section shall not apply to utilities owned or operated by counties, cities, or authorities for the purpose of water and wastewater services.
Okay, Representative Loudermilk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on that. A little concerned, why would we exempt government-owned utilities and not privately owned utilities? Is that not creating an unfair competitive advantage in some ways? If I may, Mr. Chairman, are there any other than water systems, and your amendment would just be for water and wastewater, are there any that aren't owned by municipalities in the state or by a government entity? Thank you.
Any other questions by members? Okay, Representative Reiners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still confused on if we have to make improvements to the roads, would we ever have to move those 54-inch pipes or anything like that?
I would assume there could be instances where that could happen, but these are just not something it's not like moving a small water line.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I understand that, but I'm still concerned that if the overall goal is improvement of the roadway, why we would grant any exemption, even if it's just happens only one time or it's not the big problem to this. If we put that exemption in there, could it ever be brought back to us, Mr. Chairman? If we put that exemption in there, could it ever be brought back to us? Well, I'm exempt according to state law. I don't have to do it.
That's what we're debating right now, so.
And that's what I'm trying to get an answer to.
Well, as I understand it, most of these road construction problems I'm talking to will include moving these lines. And I think DOT even has funded some of that at times, or includes that in their bid process for moving. And this is just out of an abundance of caution. I'm offering up this amendment, and I don't, like I said, these have not been the problems. This is not the problem we're dealing with, so that's, I don't know if I have a better answer to your question other than.
May I ask legal counsel, Mr. Chairman? Legal counsel, to improve or intend to improve shall remove, relocate, or make necessary adjustments. If we added this as an amendment, could it then be argued that they're exempt from that?
I don't think there would be an argument they would be exempt from that.
Thank you.
I don't have the amendment yet, but from what I understood, that's the whole intention of it, is to exempt them from the requirements of having to move anything.
Could the improvement then not happen because of it?
I can't really answer that. I would assume if they had to move a water main in order to build a road, and they were exempt from having to move it under these provisions, that it could stop the road.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments about the amendment or questions? Yep, Representative Chanel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question. Yes, I have a question. What is this? I mean, this sheet of paper got stuff.
That's the amendment part. Scratch all that out, just that part.
It's kind of ugly, but it's no amendment.
So we're not discussing whatever this is that right?
Not yet.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, again, to Representative Wicks, would you explain again what this amendment does?
It reads, this code section shall not apply to facilities owned or operated by counties, cities, or authorities existing for the purpose of water and wastewater services.
Yes, I can read what you got, but what does that do?
I'm sorry, I didn't think you had a copy.
Yes, I do. What does that do? I mean, are you saying that if it's a utility that's owned by a county or city or an authority, that they don't have to move them? Or what? I mean, what does it do?
Yesterday, the assistant general manager for the South Area Water Authority explained to us they are under mandate from 3 years ago. The bid process that these people have to go through we have told them, you've got to go receive so many bids, and you've got to do this, and there's a timeline that we have mandated to these people in order to move, expend out. So, we have mandated to them that you've got to do it this way, but then now we're coming in with this bill and saying the DOT is going to ask you to move your line, and we've got a complete different set, or at least we did in the sub I was looking at, of timelines here. What forgive utilities 60 days written notice and on and on and on. So that's what I'm saying. We're sending a mixed message of mandating first that you've got to comply with this timeline, bids before you spend money, and then we're coming back here with another timeline.
So if Representative Wicks, so if DOT want to build a road and and this was owned by a county or city or something, I mean, they just couldn't build a road or what? That's what I'm,
Well, if we pass this bill, they're gonna build it, but they're gonna build it anyhow. The utilities, this wastewater and water is. The state of pay for it. They are not going to, and the DOT has said to me, and also these other people, they are not problems, but at the same time, I was abundance of caution, I want to offer up this amendment. And it would exempt wastewater, water services owned by cities, counties, or departments.
so the effect of it is the DOT would have to pay for moving them, is that right?
Let's do it on move, because they would pay, I mean, I think they said they do for that a lot anyhow, included in the bid. So,
I'm just,
DOT wouldn't move it, it's just, they don't move it. This would just exempt them from this bill that just puts just a timeline, set timelines on it.
Is it your intention not to exempt them from moving the pipelines or the water lines? Your intention is to remove them from the time frame, the guidelines? Right. Now, my understanding, reading on page 1 of the bill, it says they have 60 days to begin. Are you sure that they're not already, I mean, all they've got to do is go out there and move some dirt and they've begun? I'm looking at line 23. Directed it to begin the physical removal.
If, so how would this amendment affect a rural county like I'm from, and we have a county water system, and we're fixing to widen a road? What would happen down there? We don't have 54-inch lines. We're lucky to have 4-inch.
I think what we're looking at is, let's say there's DOT project coming up, and they send your county notice that they're gonna do this, and it's all in advance, and so they would move ahead with the project and relocating these lines. And so you ask how it would affect, it really wouldn't affect them, but if they didn't move them, then the DOT, I mean, your county will move the lines. I mean, that hadn't been the problem, as we understand it. But this is just a situation that would coordinate or simplify to these people with wastewater and water services the timeline that they're under now and mandate from the state about bidding and spending money, and if we don't want to do that, it'll put them under a different timeline. So I don't know that it would affect your county. I think you could go ahead and build that.
I guess if a small county and they had the county water system and they didn't move the line, yet the road was being widened, what would DOT do? And if the county didn't move the line? Maybe I need somebody that knows. Does anybody know the answer to that? Please raise your hand. Now, I need somebody that knows, if a small county has a line, which we do in Harris County, and you're going to widen the road, and they say, no, we're not going to move that line, who moves that line? You come over to the microphone there.
Mr. Chairman, currently on publicly owned utilities and water authorities in particular, they're so small, the department has, if they write a letter of hardship to us, we will pick up the cost of moving those.
is there a threshold as to the amount of money available by a county as to whether or not DOT moves it, or the county's required to move it? Like if I mean, all counties are different, and everybody's going to say they're under hardship because all counties can't seem to make it as they are, so they go up on the tax. But is there a cutoff line, or do we just make a judgment call? Okay, well, maybe stay close. I don't know. Microphone 24, Representative Floyd.
I'd like to ask legislative council, if this amendment passes, wouldn't it in a sense say that that had to be part of the bid letting? The state would have to pay it for moving those water lines?
Yeah, it's my opinion from looking at this, if this were to become an issue, you would put it in, and Mr. Dent can address this also. This is all a process of working with DOT, and for example, if a county or municipal water authority had a different mandated time for changing their lines, they would of course want to put that into the work plan that they're developing with DOT. So I think I understand your question to be, yes, that could all be by agreement with the DOT as to timelines, timeframes, when you have to do it, who does it, and when you don't have to do it. And apparently that's what the idea of the work plan that this bill calls for. It would give any county or local water authority, in particular wastewater, an opportunity to meet with DOT and tell them we have to do this by another restriction, and have that worked into the work plan. What it seems to me this bill is really trying to do is to get the parties to agree on a work plan that they can then hold people responsible to. It's not really mandating absolute time frames, but it's forcing them to talk to each other and come up with a reasonable plan and then try to execute it.
Anybody else on the committee? We've got the author here, Senator Whitehead. Okay. Yeah. But we're back on the original. We're back on the original bill, the way Representative Rogers presented it at the very beginning.
But it's the same line. I mean, it's the same section that I followed.
No, section 2's got 8 words in it.
Line 30 on page 2. That's trying to move the liability for a small water authority that might not have gotten the line moved. They would become liable for damages. I think that's and not having to remove the line, period.
Why don't we back up just a minute, let Senator Whitehead kind of just give us the thrust of that bill, just like it came out of the Senate, because, subcommittee heard it, but a lot of committee members here aren't on the subcommittee. Thank you, Senator.
Chairman, I apologize for being late. 4 meetings an hour and a half. It's a little tough.
A little tough.
How's that? Is that better? Okay. Thank you, sir. Members of the committee, Senate Bill 431 originated actually from a situation in Columbia County that we have had a delay on a road in Columbia County called Furious Fair Road that is now approximately 750 days behind schedule. It's been a horrendous fiasco. And so what we're trying to do, and I explain it this way, and maybe this is not the proper way to explain it, but as you know, Representative Harbin has dropped a bill helping to get the contractors more in line or setting up specifications of how they should stay as far as staying on time. We are now trying to take that three-legged stool, being the contractors, the utilities, and the DOT. And this does put specifications in there that puts pressure on the DOT to make sure that their job's done in a more efficient way as far as when they turn this over to the contractors and to the utilities. And so what this is doing is putting in a bill that will keep the utilities more in line. It does have a penalty clause in it as far as if it goes into litigation with the contractors, then they can be part and be brought in, and they have agreed to this because it has such a step process that certainly they will, way before it comes to that, they will try to correct the situation. What we hope we're doing, Mr. Chairman, is by this three-legged stool, is we cannot help Furious Fair Road. I mean, that's 750 days and it's still not complete and still don't even have a completion date yet that we can live by. But what we hope we're doing is bringing those three entities together so that the people of Georgia won't go through this again, and so that the people of Georgia we will try to alleviate some of the transportation problems that we have going on. As you probably will agree, it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And so with all of the things that we have now and the money that we are trying to fast forward and paving the way home and things like that, we hope that this is something that will bring everybody to the table to communicate and work together for the state of Georgia.
Okay, do any committee members have any questions of the senator about the bill? Since there was an amendment offered, Representative Wicks offered an amendment. I don't know if it's there in your packet. And 2 lines talking about exempting utilities owned and operated by county, cities, or authorities for the purpose of water and wastewater. So I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, we are, and we will accept that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I got a question here, Representative Graves.
Thank you, Senator. Right here, I do have a few follow-up questions, and I know a lot of the members weren't here yesterday for the hearing. You mentioned that this would help DOT do their job better, and I'm trying to figure out where and how, because as we discussed yesterday, it's clear in current law that if somebody is behind, the DOT has the authority by law to use their own employees or contractors to take care of moving the utilities if necessary to move a project forward. How does this help them do their job any better?
Maybe that wasn't the greatest, Representative Graves, maybe not the greatest words, but of course it does put stipulations on them as far as getting design work done quicker so that we can turn it over to the utilities and get it to them in a quicker manner. Now, like I say, I don't think I'm not going to try to make them do their job better. I am going to try to make all 3 entities come together better. I have seen all 3 entities talk more in the last 3 months than they probably have talked in the last 3 years, trying to come up with a better way of doing and being more efficient of how they get these jobs done. They did not have any way of regulating the utilities in a way as far as days behind. Of course, we have tried to go in and make sure that weather days, which they have nothing that they can do about, we've tried to take all that into consideration, but certainly asking the utilities to get more involved and do it in a more efficient manner so that when they're given days to complete a job, that they come pretty close to doing it in that time frame.
If I could follow up a couple more times here. On that section C that talks about contractors can in a sense, I guess, bill a utility for being behind. And you talk about the three-legged stool, and I guess what concerns me about that part is the contractors have no agreement with the utility contractor. They have no contract with them. The DOT does.
Yes.
And the DOT has a contract with the road contractor, and the common denominator is the DOT in that. And I don't necessarily see that as a three-legged stool. I see the DOT as the pivot point, and if they're signing a contract with a road contractor and they're signing a contract with a utility contractor, it concerns me that we want to give authority to a road contractor to, in a sense, sue a utility contractor of which they don't have an agreement with.
You want to answer that, Larry? Let me let you answer, if you don't mind him answering that, because he does know more about that than I do.
The way we address that, and you're exactly correct, Representative, there's never been an agreement between the two. But if you look in Section C there, it requires the contractor to document all those damages and then bring them to their department. And we have to actually agree that those are documented damages. Otherwise, you would have the contractor going straight to the utility company. So we're, again, caught in the middle, as we always are in this. And so we're try the balance in that whole thing. But there's never been that vehicle to allow the contractor to seek any compensation, because he did not have any contract or way to get his damages. So this is the purpose of that whole section right there, is to get that vehicle that allows the contractor to recoup those damages if he can document and substantiate them.
Can I continue? Thinking about in my area, we do have a city in my district that provides power, and the way this is written, it allows a contractor to sue the city, in a sense, for being behind. I know the amendment addressed water and sewer lines, and you referenced small towns, small communities, and they don't have the ability to move things quick enough or afford the damages, so they might need to be exempt. But what about the small contractors? What about the small business guy who can't quite get to the things as well either? And I guess it concerns me, one, that we allow a contractor possibly to sue a road contractor to sue a city, but we want to exempt certain parts of it, being water and sewer and other things, and yet we grant a lot of privileges to the municipal utilities that we don't necessarily grant to private companies providing utilities.
When the bill was originally written, we made no exceptions whatsoever, because we also knew we were dealing with those entities that didn't have the ability. So we didn't make any exclusions in the original bill. We included every utility in there that would delay a project, because I think you got to look, there's other issues involved here. There's the safety of the traveling public if somebody's not moving the utility, and you've got people on detours, and it's because somebody's not pursuing work. I think you have a responsibility to the safety of the traveling public to consider every avenue there. So that's why we did not exclude anybody in the original bill, Representative.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question speaks to this same thing and to the amendment. If our objective is truly to make it work more efficiently, then I'm having difficulty understanding why we would exempt certain utility operators.
The original bill did not have any exemptions in it. That's been a substitute that certainly we have looked at that, and I guess when you look at the picture of who we've had the most issues with, it's not been them. So if you were going to exempt a group that weren't a problem or hadn't been a problem to any degree, that would be the group that you would look at, I guess, has been our position.
But, and I guess if it hasn't been a problem, and we want the same level of accountability between all of the parties involved, would it behoove us to exempt them or let's put everybody on the same level playing field?
When we started with this, Representative, the original bill, we were using a permit process of holding permits. And we took into consideration that we, in some of the smaller utilities that you're talking about, that we probably could hurt them very bad at holding permits. And so this was what we came out with, trying to exempt some of them so that we did not affect them, but at the same time, put some type of penalty in there just to, to give us some kind of control over the situation that we did not have before.
But if the problem is that it's taking an extended period of time, why would we? And I understand that the cost involved and incurred by the utility, but why would we exempt them if they are in fact the problem, or part of the problem?
In most cases, and Commissioner, you correct me if I'm wrong, but in most cases it's the larger utilities that is a problem, not the water lines that some of the smaller utilities may have or the cities might have.
A significant portion of the water lines are now included in the contractor's project, which he controls the subcontractor doing that work. So that was one of the things that we have encouraged all the utilities to do that, because we think that if you put your utilities in the contract and let the contractor control them, then any delays are the contractor's own delays. But there's some utilities that we haven't gotten to that level, and some of them it's almost impossible to put them in the contract. But that's where we're migrating, and we have been working in task force with the utility companies to make improvements, and Representative was speaking of that earlier about the things that DOT has done. We have now are submitting our plans electronically to the utility companies quicker when we get 30% plans to put the footprint out there so they know what to do. So we're trying to be more proactive in getting the information to them quicker so they can react quicker. And so we're putting a lot of responsibility on ourselves in here as well.
Thank you.
Representative Graves.
Just trying to think through the process again. Are there ever instances where a contractor holds up a utility from doing his job?
They're probably going to argue that, because contractors ultimately goes out and grades the job early on in the process, and he very well might have changed the staging plans on the contract. And actually, when the utility company started out, they were going to do phase one relocation. Well, the contractor comes out and he's figured that he can make more money if he does it in reverse and goes to phase three first. As a result, you could say they held him up, but in this bill, we allow the utility more time to relocate as a result of that. We do not hold that time against him if the contractor changes his plans, and it very plainly states that in the contract, because that has happened where contractor decides he can move the dirt more efficiently or cost efficiently if he starts down at the other end of the job, and so he revises his plans, his staging plans. And so in essence, they have held up the utility, but then the utility company is allowed additional time on the contract for that.
Would this in any way allow the utility to seek damages from the contractor?
I didn't. That's not in there, no, sir.
Would that be something worth considering, you think? Just trying to get the three-legged stool balanced a little bit.
I haven't thought down that vein yet. I can.
Yeah, thinking along that line, I'm thinking about maybe a project where you're grading an interstate or a highway, and you go a third of the way down the road grading, and you hit massive granite, and the company has to, of course, they have rock clauses. The contractors always have, most of them that are wise have a rock clause. They continue on down the road, they jump that granite, and they continue on grading the road, but they have to wait to blow the rock, drill the rock, and blow the rock, and you've got your gas company or telephone or whoever it is, they're working down the road. It's kind of hard to jump over and come back and splice that in, so therefore they pull off and go to another job waiting for that to be blown. That's actually costing them money. So could they seek damages as far as if a contractor did that to a utility company and could sue? I'm asking the same question, I guess. Could they sue the contractor?
There's no provisions in this portion of the law to do that. Normally, the utility company, it's not. You clear an acre and they come put a pole in. There's usually sections that are open to them at a time. The contractor tries to open, but there could be a situation where you hit rock and there have to be blasting done, and certainly that's a benefit to the utility contractor, though, for the grading contractor to move that rock out of there, because ultimately that's not a requirement That's just
Well,
to his benefit.
That's just one opinion. Sometimes they blow the rock enough to get the road in, but they don't blow it 48 inches
Well,
deep to get the line in.
I agree with
'Cause
that.
they're not going to spend any money on any extra blowing if they don't have to. So.
I agree with that.
Representative Reynolds.
Are we trying to create an avenue here for people to go to court? And I mean, I certainly hope not, or to give somebody recourse to say, well, it's not me. Why don't we go to court? And frankly, Mr. Chairman, if we are, then that probably ought to be settled in the court of law and shouldn't have anything on the books that turn around and say that was the intent of the legislature. That's not what we're trying to do here, are we?
I wouldn't. I think if you look at the steps of this, that it's certainly not trying to do that. I'm not saying that it won't wind up that way, but I think if you look at the step process of what's here, I can't imagine anybody going through all of these steps or not adhering somewhere in that step process that it would wind up in court, but I guess at some point in time, anything could wind up.
Well, I appreciate your situation, if you allow me to continue in Augusta, and because that could happen anywhere in Georgia,
Sure.
and I'm certainly
hoping it
sympathetic to
doesn't
that.
happen anywhere.
Absolutely. But we've gone in there and we've said, if you're not within X amount of completion, within X amount of time, then you're going to be punished in a certain way. And I'm wondering if the contractors haven't come back and said, now, well, what if it's not our fault? Maybe it's the utilities' fault. I mean, is this what we're trying to do, is provide cover there?
When we looked at the cause of delays on DOT projects and trying to be proactive in addressing those, 20% of the delays on all the construction projects in DOT were delays because of utilities. And so this is just one of those efforts to try to address that delay and support the projects moving forward in the state of Georgia in a timely fashion. And that's the whole design of this legislation.
And I appreciate that. If this legislation was not passed, what would you do then? Would you then be able to still go to the courts to seek the reason why you might have lost the contract to begin with was because of the utilities and prove your case there?
I'm not aware of any avenue the contractor has to recoup damages from the utility company outside of this legislation. Now, there might be, but I'm not aware of them.
I just thought there'd be plenty of good lawyers out there willing to take it. Thank you.
Might be.
Representative, I will say this, if you'll allow me to, that, and I hate to refer to somebody else's bill, but Representative Harbin's bill with the contractors comes into play a whole long time before this ever comes into play. That's my opinion and not maybe their opinion, but certainly if that comes into effect with the contractors, if he says that, well, part of it was because of the utilities, and it does give them an avenue there to litigate against at some point in time against the utilities.
Anybody else? Representative Graves.
Commissioner Dent, you referenced the 20% delays being utility related. Is that something DOT has documented that you keep a report on?
Yes, we went back and evaluated the delays on projects for, I think it was FY05. The reasons that we had to give time extensions on jobs or the reason jobs did not get completed on time. So that was one of the reasons. Weather was one of them. We had plan errors, and we have addressed that in Arizona mission clauses with our contracts where somebody makes an error designing plans. So we have tried to address a number of issues that were causing delays on projects. So
what was the greatest cause, the greatest percentage?
there was 3 things, and they're all around 20%, and I think it was weather, plan errors, and utilities. They were all in the 20 to 22 or 3% range, and then there was a multitude of other reasons that came into play.
And whose plan errors? Are these private engineers or are they department?
We hire 65% of our plans are out to consultants, so we have 35% in-house, 65% outside the department, and so it could have been broken evenly along those lines, I'm sure.
So is there anywhere in current law or in this here that allows for a contractor to seek damages from the DOT for delay?
he is compensated. If there's plan errors that cost him money, there's compensation that he is due, and we compensate him for a plan error. When it's
For changes in the plans or for delays in the plan, in the implementation of the
for
project?
changes he has to make in plans, but it also would have to cover, it would also cover additional time that he incurred as a result of the work caused by that error in the plans.
Okay.
Anybody else? I'm waiting to hear the pleasure of the committee. Got to have a motion to have a vote. All right, we got a motion and a second. We got Representative Wicks down here with an amendment.
Assume, what did we ever do that? Is that amendment included in there?
You're up right now.
I'd like to make a motion to amend Senate Bill 431, whichever one we're on here, with the language that we've mentioned and the author has agreed to.
I guess I can take the last motion and second first, can I, Legislative Council, on the amendment? All in favor of any discussion? All right, let's go. Discussion on Mr. Wicks' amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the amendment. The amendment, as I read it, excludes those folks referenced in the amendment from the entire code section that's referenced here. And whereas other utilities are under this code section, it totally exempts them from the entire code section. And I want to know if that's the intent of the gentleman.
I think I understand your question. We exempt them from this bill, and that you're saying it exempts them from the entire code section?
That would be my reading of it.
Maybe we let Legislative Council.
The intent is to exempt them from this piece of legislation.
If you don't mind, let's ask Legislative Council and see what Mr. Rick says.
Yeah, you're both right. This legislation is the code section, and yes, they would be exempt from the entire code section, or in his terminology, from the entire bill.
They don't have to move.
So yeah, you're both right. The amendment is worded to say this code section, which would be the entire code section. This code section shall not apply. And that would be the entire code section 32-6-171. It doesn't say if your intent is to exempt them from the provisions of subsection C of the code section, then we could write it to say that. But the way it...
That's the intent, Mr. Legislative Council. If you could help me with that, please.
Well, we could just we could just rewrite your amendment to say paragraph C, subsection C, subsection C of this code section shall not apply.
Okay, so we're going to amend the amendment saying subsection C of this code section shall not apply, and then the rest of the sentence as it is. And do I have a second on that? You got a second on that? Now discussion on that motion. Representative Chanel. Coming to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's all right, I have a question of the department. Are you in favor or not in favor of this amendment?
Would exempting section C out, the liability section, that, I think that would be something we could live with.
That's what the amendment is?
Right.
So you're all right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative, do you have a question about this amendment?
Well, yes. It's, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to reiterate my initial, not necessarily concern, but interest in this amendment. If in my mind, if there's if there's not a problem currently with these utilities, then it seems that there would really be no need to pass this amendment. If they're not creating the problem, then why, do we need to go to the extent and exempt them if they aren't the problem? So I would just like to express my opposition just because of that. If there's not a problem, then I don't, in my mind, we shouldn't necessarily go through the exercise of exempting them.
Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Representative May's point. Again, going back to what Assistant Commissioner Dent said earlier, it was his original intent that there be no exemptions. Is that the case?
Right.
And I just really think that there's some danger here in saying we've got a problem, we want the three-legged stool to be balanced, but we don't want it to be balanced with this particular entity. Thank you.
Okay, we got a motion, an amended motion on the floor in a second. Any other discussion before we vote? All in favor of the amended amendment, changing that to... Yes, sir, go ahead.
Is this vote a vote to amend the amendment, or is this passing the entire amendment?
My intention is to vote to amend the amendment. Now, you tell me, Legislative Council.
You can do it either way. You could vote on this amendment as amended, or you can vote on the amendment to the amendment.
I just wanted to know which we were voting for.
I can restate that, and you can go ahead and vote on the whole thing. We'll just vote on the amendment as amended, as Legislative Council said. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Aye. All right, all those in favor raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now, is that what y'all got? Y'all helping me count? All those against, raise your hand. We need to call one more person to the meeting. We got a tie vote. We're going to vote one more time. I'm going to see if y'all change your mind. Huh? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Reynolds.
Is it not true? Is it not true that we stated earlier that this could have a worse effect on those smaller water authorities and smaller rural areas? For those of us that live and represent small water systems, was it not stated earlier that this could be a more difficult time in order to get one of those exemptions?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I'm going to recognize the other side, Mr. Wicks.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Following up on Mr. Reinders, 2 or 3 years ago, some of you probably remember when I carried the call before you dig bill, and we went in many ways right down this same road. And I think, just like Mr. Reinders said, you've got small water utilities back home, all of you do, cities, counties, authorities, and, they may not have heard of this legislation that's moving through, but I'm sure you're going to hear from them if it does move through.
Okay, thank you. One short comment, and then we're going to vote. Mr. Chanel, Representative Chanel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I inquire to you, Representative Reinders' comment. I represent a rural area. It seems to me that it's just a reverse of that. If this amendment passes, then our small rural system is going to be exempt. It seems like it's going to help small rural systems rather than hurt. It seems to me, Mr. Chairman. Is that right or not?
I'm going to let each and every member decide that for themselves. Y'all hadn't heard that before, have you? All right, we're going to have to. We're in a push here, and I don't know what they're going to do to us because there's another meeting coming. But I want to get this. I want to do this bill justice and do it right. So let's just go right up until the limit. And when the young lady here tells me we've got to stop, we're going to have to stop. But I already got several lights on now. I've got Representative Graves.
I guess following Representative Reiner's parliamentary inquiry, thinking about the rural areas, I also think that there are many large metropolitan areas that have these same utilities that are owned or operated for water and wastewater services, and it seems to me that exempting them would in no way help the contractors if that's what indeed what we're trying to do is push this process forward and help roads move forward. If the the metropolitan areas that seem to be so concerned about transportation, and yet we're exempting their utilities from being accountable and responsible, it may slow the process.
Representative May.
I'll pass. He made the point.
Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I know rural Georgia, urban Georgia, all of that, but I think our issue here is building roads in a timely manner, and we need to treat all 159 counties alike. I just want to make that point.
Okay, we had a tie vote the first time. We're going to try it one more time. Everybody in favor of the amendment as amended, passing the amendment as amended, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Everybody opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Amendment fails 9 to 10. Say what?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have also an amendment that has been passed out to everyone. And if you don't want to, maybe we could do it in rules. Is it your pleasure? Okay. You said do? Okay. Under Section 1, page 2, line 23, following relocation and before the semicolon, would insert the language, except in the case of natural gas facilities where the work must be performed in accordance with 49 CFR Part 192 as required by the Federal Office of Pipeline Safety. We just insert that language there. And I believe that the department is okay with that and the utilities. It's what I'm understanding correctly.
Would you ask him to repeat? I've got that. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it.
I believe all parties are in agreement. I believe.
In discussing this, this is redundant in some of the rules we have. I think my statement was that it wasn't worth the bloodshed if it was going to cause a lot, but we cover this in another section of the department's rules and regulations. So, but if it's necessary to get support, then we'll stay silent.
Page 2. Page.
You might want to tell everybody. Tell everybody where that is.
Yes, in the original version of the bill, Senate Bill 431, Section 1, page 2, line 23. Following is necessary to accomplish the removal or relocation. After relocation and before the semicolon, it would insert the language.
Okay, Representative Wicks.
Mr. Chairman, the department just said that's redundant, and I was looking at it, you think that would be pretty obvious. I don't even know why we would need this amendment, and I was just wondering, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, well, I got some more questions here, but, all right. Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I think the issue here is to be redundant with the department to make sure the DOT doesn't go out and remove a gas line and blow themselves up. That's the reason they want this in here.
All right. Okay.
That's
Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this does is it refers whoever's reading the language to the appropriate code section, the federal code section.
Okay, we've got a suggested. You want to make that in form of a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right, we got a suggested motion to amend the bill, and I think we all know the amendment. Does anybody have more questions? Do we hear a second on that amendment? Okay, we got a motion second. Any discussion of the amendment? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Okay, I think the ayes have it. And if y'all want, does anybody want a hand vote? Okay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Now, the pleasure of the committee on Senate Bill 431. Make a motion to pass, and we have a second? All right, any discussion? All in favor say aye. And all opposed. And it does pass.